I'm Dr. Lena Popovic, and after 30 plus years in medical practice, I realised there's a lot missing from modern medicine. Education is more powerful than medication, and our decisions have more impact than our DNA.
Last week's Brain Booster was Go With Your Gut, a deep dive into all things gut health. And it was another very long episode, so I ended it after the health headline. That means if you haven't watched or listened to last week's episode, I strongly recommend you do so before you listen to this one, because last week I explained the rationale for what I'm talking about today. So let's launch straight into what's missing from modern medicine. When it comes to gut health, what's missing from modern medicine is a nuanced, personalised approach. Because every individual's microbiome is so highly unique, traditional one-size-fits-all probiotic supplements often fail to establish colonisation. In other words, we just poop them out. And even more often, they fail to deliver the expected health benefits. Probiotic supplements need to be regarded as strain-specific therapies, which means they target specific conditions. But even then, a specific microbial strain that improves symptoms in one person may have zero effect or even adverse effects in another, largely due to pre-existing genetic, microbial and dietary differences. The other problem is that commercial pre- and probiotics are only very loosely regulated. They're treated as dietary supplements. They're not treated as pharmaceutical drugs. And that leads to inconsistencies in bacterial potency, exact strain verification, i.e. there's no guarantee you're getting the bugs that are listed on the bottle, and viability, i.e. you don't know whether the bacteria actually survive your stomach acid to reach your gut. And as I mentioned earlier, the real frontier of medicine lies in metabolomics, the chemical byproducts, the metabolites, such as short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, that these microbial communities are producing. It's the metabolites that make the difference, not necessarily the bacteria, because different bacteria can produce the same or different metabolites. Now, I just realised that I've been throwing around the word probiotic without actually defining it. So let's do that now. Probiotics are live microorganisms believed to provide health benefits when we consume them. The prefix pro means in favour of, and bio refers to life or living organisms. Natural probiotics, also known as dynamic probiotics, are live bacteria and yeasts that develop naturally in food via fermentation. The most common natural probiotics are yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, miso, tempeh, and kombucha. So the bacteria in natural probiotics are actively alive. They're feeding on sugars in the food, like milk or cabbage, and they're creating new compounds. So the exact amount and types of bacteria in a natural probiotic change every day because the microbes constantly react to alterations in temperature, time, and acidity. And there's no argument that these foods are great for your gut. Which fermented foods are the best? Go with your gut. Listen to your body. Which fermented foods do you most enjoy eating? Which ones most agree with you? And if you've never had any, start low and go slow. In other words, start with a very small daily dose and build up gradually over time, or you might give yourself a very upset tummy. Manufactured probiotics, in contrast, also known as static probiotics, are isolated laboratory-cultured bacterial strains packaged in precise amounts into daily supplements. So they're concentrated, freeze-dried microorganisms grown in labs and formulated into pills, powders, or liquids. And they contain a fixed number of bacteria that doesn't change over time. So while natural probiotics offer diverse, broader health benefits, the exact types, quantities and potency of the live bacteria are difficult to measure and can vary widely. But as I said, they're still excellent for our health. Meanwhile, manufactured versions claim to deliver targeted relief for specific gastrointestinal and other health issues. However, whether they live up to their claims is highly debatable. And it's not because the people who make them are being deliberately deceptive, it's just that the science simply isn't there yet. The best we can really say is that probiotic supplements may be effective for certain people under certain circumstances. But we don't actually know who those people are or what those circumstances need to be. So if you're interested, it's going to be a case of personal trial and error. Interestingly, every culture in the world has a range of fermented dishes, from sourdough to pickled gherkins to fermented cheeses. But warning, if you're buying commercially produced versions of these products, sometimes they use vinegar instead of fermentation, especially supermarket sourdough breads. And even if they do use bacteria, the end product is often heated to kill off the bacteria because of fears about food safety, which defeats the whole purpose of the food. Hence, people are increasingly learning to ferment their own foods, or they're visiting their local farmers markets. Great idea. So that's probiotics. Prebiotics, on the other hand, are types of non-digestible fibre that pass through your stomach and small intestine undigested and act as a fertiliser to fuel and stimulate the growth of healthy bacteria in the colon. So, a simple way to think about it is prebiotics are food for specific probiotics. And natural prebiotics occur in whole plant-based foods that contain what are known as fructans, especially inulin, not to be confused with insulin. Inulin, it's a prebiotic, and also resistant starches. They're another type of prebiotic. So all prebiotics are fibres, but not all fibres are prebiotics. To be classified as a prebiotic, a fibre has to specifically pass through your stomach undigested and selectively feed only the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Now, all whole fruits and vegetables contain fibre because it forms part of their structural framework. But not all fruits and vegetables contain prebiotics. And even when it comes to non-prebiotic fibres, some plant foods have more than others. The key word when it comes to fibre content is whole fruit and vegetables. Juices have next to zero fibre because when you strain the pulp, when you strain the seeds and the skins, you eliminate most of the fibre. Peeled and de-seeded cucumbers and tomatoes are also pretty much devoid of fibre. The flesh of melons has only minimal amounts of fibre. And tinned, cooked, peeled root vegetables, or canned for my US friends, they also have very low amounts of fibre because when you boil and peel root vegetables like carrots and white potatoes, it reduces the already low fibre values to trace amounts that are easily digested. So only a specific subset of plant products contain prebiotics in high enough concentrations to meaningfully feed your microbes. Just for completeness, low prebiotic but high fibre fruits and vegetables include broccoli, carrots, celery, spinach, zucchini, capsicum, unpeeled seeded cucumbers, berries, apples, and oranges. They're still good for us, but they don't have prebiotic properties. The richest natural sources of prebiotics include the onion family, technically known as alliums, so onion, garlic, leeks, shallots. Other really high prebiotic natural foods are asparagus, fennel, both the bulb and the seeds, globe and Jerusalem artichokes, dandelion greens and endive, lentils, chickpeas, green peas, beans including white, kidney and black beans, chia seeds, cashews, steel-cut oats, and firm green bananas and plantains. The latter, i.e. the legumes, seeds, nuts, oats, and unripe bananas, they're examples of what are known as resistant starches. Now, you wouldn't eat an unripe banana, but you might use banana flour as a healthier gluten-free alternative to wheat flour in baking and thickening soups, stews and gravies. Banana flour, by the way, is made by peeling, drying and grinding unripe green bananas, so it isn't sweet, and because it has a dense starchy texture, you generally need 25 to 40%, that is a quarter to maybe even a half less banana flour than you would regular wheat flour in a recipe. And if you use banana flour as a thickening agent, mix it with a cold liquid first to prevent lumps from falling. As for manufactured prebiotics, often called synthetic or commercial prebiotics that are sold as supplements, they're either extracted from natural plants at highly concentrated levels, or they're synthesized from simple sugars like sucrose or lactose using enzymes and beneficial bacteria. And they either come as capsules, powders, and gummies, or they're added to processed foods like protein bars, cereals, yogurts, and baby formulas. And that's so that processed food companies can claim that their products contain prebiotics and the unsuspecting consumer assumes that they're healthy. Just because prebiotics are added to a product does not automatically make it healthy. It might be healthy, but if it also contains a heap of added sugar, emulsifiers, artificial colours, flavourings, preservatives and other chemicals, all of which harm your good gut bacteria, your symbionts, the prebiotics won't compensate. The other thing to be aware of is that for prebiotics to have a positive effect, whether natural or manufactured, you need to have good bacteria already present in your gut. Otherwise, there isn't an organism there to make use of the prebiotic. The most common manufactured prebiotic that you've probably heard of is psyllium husk. Now, you might have guessed by now, my preference is by far to eat natural pre- and probiotics rather than to consume them as supplements. But if you really want to take a psyllium husk supplement, because maybe you feel you're not eating enough real prebiotic foods, or you're dealing with a specific gut issue that you've been told might improve with psyllium, such as diarrhea or constipation, I'll give you a few important guidelines. Start low and go slow, i.e. introduce psyllium husk gradually. No more than 3 to 5 grams or half to 1 teaspoon a day to start with. You need to give your gut time to adjust. Otherwise, you might experience very uncomfortable gas or bloating. Secondly, hydration is mandatory. Always mix psyllium husk with plenty of water, at least 250 millilitres, a big glass, and drink it straight away. Because if you don't drink enough, it can actually swell and cause a blockage in your throat or bowel. Very, very uncomfortable. And take psyllium at least 2 to 3 hours before or after any other medications, because it forms a thick gel that can interfere with the absorption of nutrients and medications. I am assuming, of course, that you've ruled out infectious and other serious causes of diarrhea and constipation that require definitive treatment. Now, you might be asking yourself, how can psyllium treat both diarrhea and constipation? And it's because of the way it manages the water in your gut. Psyllium is a highly soluble fibre, and when it comes into contact with water, it acts like a sponge. When you're constipated, your colon has absorbed too much water from your stool, leaving it dry, hard, small, and difficult to pass. When you drink psyllium with a large glass of water, the psyllium absorbs the water from the glass that you've just drunk and carries it through your stomach and small intestine to your colon. Because the water is tightly bound to the fibre gel, your colon can't suck it out, which adds bulk and moisture back into your stool. And the bulk also stimulates your intestines to contract, helping you pass stool more easily and regularly. Having said that, before you even try psyllium, try just drinking more water, because the most common cause of constipation is chronic dehydration, and the simplest cure for constipation is to drink more water every day. So before you try anything else, try water. In contrast, when you have diarrhea, your stool contains too much liquid, so it moves through your intestines too quickly. When psyllium enters that type of watery environment, even though it already carries water with it, it can continue to suck up the excess fluid sloshing around in your bowel, and it turns your watery stool into a firmer, more formed stool. Psyllium also slows down the transit time of your digestive tract, giving your body a chance to settle down and process things in a more orderly way. Now here's a bonus tip. You can turn potatoes, rice and pasta into prebiotics by cooling them after cooking. Remember I said earlier that cooked peeled potatoes, rice and pasta have negligible fibre and prebiotic value. But you can change this. Resistant starch, a type of prebiotic that I mentioned occurs naturally in legumes and green bananas, also forms through a process called starch retrogradation, which happens when potatoes, rice and pasta are cooked and then allowed to cool down. Because when you cook potatoes, rice and pasta, you change their chemical architecture. And when you cool them down, the architecture rebuilds itself into a completely different crystal structure that is so densely and tightly bound that your digestive enzymes, specifically pancreatic amylase, can't fit between the molecules to break them down. So it makes the starch resistant to digestion, hence the term resistant starch. Now the news gets even better. It's a common myth that reheating reverses this process. It doesn't. Reheating can actually increase or at least maintain the amount of resistant starch, provided you don't completely overcook it into mush. Because the new crystalline structures formed during cooling are much more heat stable than the original raw starch crystals. Normal reheating temperatures, like popping a potato in the microwave or tossing pasta in a pan for a few minutes, doesn't provide enough heat energy to break those newly formed tightly packed bonds. And there's even what's known as a stacking effect. If you reheat the food and let it cool a second time, the amount of resistant starch actually increases further. Each cycle of cooking and cooling creates more indigestible crystals. Now, to maximise this effect, you need to cool the cooked starch in the fridge below 4 degrees Celsius for at least 12 hours. After that, you can safely eat it cold, as in sushi rice, or reheat it to your preferred eating temperature without losing the gut health benefits. But the increase in resistant starch varies significantly between potatoes, rice and pasta due to their different chemical profiles. White and brown rice have the biggest percentage increase. You more than double, up to triple, the amount of resistant starch in your bowl of rice, which is enough to significantly lower blood sugar responses in human trials. Potatoes start with a higher baseline of starch overall, so while the percentage increase in resistant starch is roughly double, i.e. less than for rice, the total amount of gut-friendly fibre you get per 100 grams of potatoes is the highest. Here, highest of the three. And how you cook your potatoes also makes a difference. Baked or roasted potatoes that are cooled yield significantly more resistant starch than boiled potatoes that are cooled. Pasta, unfortunately, has the smallest increase in resistant starch because of the manufacturing process. The extrusion process used to make pasta tightly packs the starch molecules together before you even cook it. So cooling your spaghetti gives you maybe 50% increase in resistant starch. Still better than nothing. Okay, to finish defining the words I listed at the very start of this episode. Synbiotics are simply combinations of probiotics and prebiotics, i.e. they're food products or dietary supplements that combine probiotics with prebiotics. So you're getting the live beneficial bacteria together with the specialised plant fibres that feed those bacteria. Are there any single natural foods that contain both pre and probiotics? As far as I'm aware, very few. Raw dandelion greens and chicory root, they contain natural prebiotic fibres, and they can also contain surface microbes. So that's two options. Also, certain unpasteurised, fibre-rich fermented foods like traditional kimchi or sauerkraut, they contain both the live bacteria and the raw vegetable fibres they feed on. But you can just easily combine a pre and probiotic food for yourself. Have some kimchi with a stir fry that contains onions, garlic and leek, and there you have a synbiotic meal. Or a traditional miso soup made with seaweed and green onions combines live koji cultures with marine prebiotic fibres. And some yogurts are fortified with the prebiotic inulin to create a synbiotic product. Now, just for interest, inulin can also make yogurt taste a bit sweeter and creamier, but it doesn't spike your insulin, so it's all good. And if you want to know if your yogurt contains a prebiotic, check the ingredient list for the terms inulin or chicory root extract, chicory root fibre, oligofructose or fructooligosaccharides or FOS. And of course, you can also consume synbiotics through supplements in the form of capsules or powder sachets. So we've ticked off probiotics, prebiotics and synbiotics. We now come to psychobiotics. Now these are a specific class of pro and prebiotics that confer mental health and cognitive benefits. Now psychobiotics don't physically travel to your brain. They're designed to influence your mental state from within the gut, and they do that by producing neurotransmitters, stimulating your vagus nerve, lowering levels of the stress hormone cortisol and reducing inflammation. Do psychobiotics work? Look, we know that there is definitely a connection between gut health and mood. That's well established. But the study of commercial psychobiotics is still a very young emerging field. Psychobiotics could potentially serve as a complementary approach to mental well-being, but as you know, our cognitive and mental health is tied to the totality of our lives. So it's very unlikely that a psychobiotic will ever be the only solution to a person's mental health needs. It's not impossible if they have a very specific microbial deficit or imbalance, but it's unlikely. Postbiotics are a preparation of dead microorganisms and or their cellular components that are purported to provide a health benefit. So while probiotics are live bacteria, postbiotics are deliberately killed by bacteria. But even though they are no longer alive, their physical structures and their cellular fragments can still actively interact with our body. A pharmabiotic is any biological material derived from our gut microbiota that is formulated and used as a pharmaceutical drug to prevent or treat a specific medical condition. So while probiotics and synbiotics refer to functional foods or commercial dietary supplements, pharmabiotics are subjected to the same strict clinical trials, scientific substantiation, and quality standards required for prescription medications. So you can't buy pharmabiotics over the counter. You need a prescription from a qualified health professional. And as for pen and panbiotics, I included them in my opening just for fun. Penbiotic is a common brand name for veterinary injectable penicillin antibiotics used in livestock. And Panbiotic is a global pharmaceutical manufacturer based in Taiwan that produces general prescription medications, supplements and skincare. So I just wanted to have a bit of fun with all the biotics out there. So in summary, prebiotics are food for probiotics. Combinations of pre and probiotics are synbiotics. Probiotics that mess with your mind are psychobiotics. Dead probiotics are postbiotics. Probiotics produce metabolites, and any part of a microorganism or its products that has scientifically validated health benefits is a pharmabiotic. Today's weather report is from Sarah.
I'd like to know whether I should take probiotics when I'm given a course of antibiotics. I've received conflicting advice and don't know what to do.
Thank you, Sarah. You're certainly not alone in your uncertainty, because the relationship between probiotics and antibiotics is one of the most debated topics in gut health. The short answer is, it depends on your primary goal. The confusion stems from a paradox in the scientific data. While probiotics are highly effective in preventing immediate side effects like diarrhea when you take antibiotics, they can slow down the long-term recovery of your native unique microbiome. So if your primary concern is avoiding the immediate uncomfortable side effects of antibiotics, clinical evidence shows that taking specific probiotic strains during your antibiotic course can reduce your risk of developing antibiotic-associated diarrhea or dangerous Clostridium difficile infections. The way probiotics work in this instance is by acting as a temporary placeholder on your gut wall. In other words, they prevent opportunistic harmful bacteria, which you'll remember from earlier are called pathobionts. Probiotics prevent pathobionts from taking over while your native flora is depleted by the antibiotic. And if you take probiotics for this purpose, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners recommend Lactobacillus rhamnosus or the probiotic yeast Saccharomyces boulardii. Now, Saccharomyces boulardii is particularly good because it's a yeast, so it can't be killed by antibacterial medications, making it highly effective to take concurrently. On the other hand, if your primary goal is getting your original pre-antibiotic gut ecosystem back as quickly as possible, taking generic multi-strain bacterial supplements immediately after your course might actually hinder you. In a landmark study by the Weizmann Institute of Science and the Tel Aviv Medical Center, published in the journal Cell, 21 volunteers were given a course of antibiotics and then split into 3 groups. The first group's microbiome was left to recover on its own. They were given nothing. The second group was given generic probiotics twice daily for 4 weeks. The third group, wait for it, was given what's known as an autologous fecal microbiota transplant, which is a fancy way of saying you provide a sample of your stool before you start taking antibiotics, and then when you stop your antibiotics, your stool is popped back into your bottom. I know it sounds hilarious or gross, but this is serious science. And what did they find? After taking antibiotics, your gut resembles a clean canvas. And the massive influx of foreign probiotic strains can hog resources and physical space in your gut and block your native indigenous bacterial strains from waking up and multiplying. So the people who took no probiotic supplements actually returned to their baseline microbiome faster than those who took multi-strain bacterial probiotics. In some cases, it took months for the probiotic users to regain their original population of gut microorganisms, and some of the subjects never made a complete recovery. As for those who received back their own stools, their original microbiome was restored in a matter of days. So if you need to take antibiotics, here's how you might get the best of both worlds. If you're prone to getting an upset stomach when you take antibiotics, try a targeted, high-quality probiotic like S. boulardii to protect your gut lining. And space your doses. Take the probiotic at least 2 to 3 hours apart from your antibiotic so the medication doesn't immediately kill any beneficial bacteria that might also be in the probiotic. As I said earlier, S. boulardii is a fungi and it's unaffected by antibacterial antibiotics, but it's still a good idea not to mix your medications. Then, as soon as you finish your course of antibiotics, stop your probiotics and focus on eating prebiotic foods to fuel your indigenous flora. You might also like to gradually introduce diverse traditional fermented foods, gradually being the operative word. My final suggestion, and this is probably the most important one of all, is to make sure that taking antibiotics is absolutely necessary in the first place. Australia has one of the highest antibiotic prescribing rates in the developed world, and research has found that between 30 and 50% of antibiotic prescriptions written by GPs are inappropriate or completely unnecessary. Even in hospital settings, 1 in 4 antibiotic prescriptions are inappropriate. And by inappropriate, I mean the antibiotics are given for viral infections, for which they don't work, or the person is kept on antibiotics for too many days. And this is especially the case after surgery or in residential aged care facilities. So that's the data to date. I'll leave you to decide on the most appropriate course of action for you. Thank you so much for listening and for sending me your weather questions. I will get to them all in due course. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And I look forward to sharing with you another Brain Booster, Health Headline, Missing Medical Marvel and Weather Report next week.
Please note that this podcast is for general information purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice and is not intended to provide specific guidance for any particular situation. The use of this information is at the viewer and listener's own risk and is not a substitute for consulting a healthcare provider.